Hey, this is Mark Keller. Check out my new podcast, and I will take you on a trip, not an acid trip, through my 60 plus years in the retail and wholesale business. While some of the stories will entertain you, some will shock you. So let's talk and let's listen to the stories that I can tell about the industry I have devoted most of my life to, which is clothing. We all wear clothes, and when we walk out of our houses, we all look good, hopefully. I've worked to make sure that it happens that way, and that is my contribution to telling the stories of how this industry functions and some of the amazing and indeed crazy people that I have met down through the years. While craziness is not necessarily something that defines creativity, it surely helps. We will have conversations with many of them, and many you will know their names, some you may not, and the stories that they tell will at times be interesting and sometimes shocking. So, why the King of Cool? It was actually the headline of an article that a local magazine used, and while I am surely not a king, but everyone loved the title, so there you have it. I may have called myself the OG of cool since I'm truly an old gangster when it comes to clothing, but let's not split hairs. It is surely not that important. But I do know a thing or two about what is cool. For instance, Miles Davis, Bruce Springsteen, Patti Smith, Bob Marley and the Wailers, James Brown, the Rolling Stones, and the Beatles. I'm just a regular guy from the streets of Detroit, born there, but mostly have lived in Oak Park in Birmingham, Michigan. I have for the last 2 centuries, and it sounds so weird to even say 2 centuries, been blessed with 2 great eyes and ears, be it music or clothing or any of the cultural touchstones, but mostly real street fashion, be it the streets of Detroit, New York, Los Angeles, London, or Paris. Looking back and forward, it is most important for me to always recognize that something special that makes one take notice. This will basically be an inside look at the world of fashion. I've always been drawn to what is next and what will last the test of time, and that to me is the most important thing. Trends may be interesting, but will they last? Hippie clothing was a trend, but somehow it survived the test of time in many ways. And American workwear for men and real American clothing has withstood the test of time, especially when tweaked by the Japanese or cool young American designers. Alternatives have always defined my way of looking at the way people dress. I've always wanted to see things a bit differently, be it a collar or a button or the way a sweater is knitted. Please make it interesting, and please make sure that what you are wearing makes you be seen. We are not invisible today, nor are we wearing the same old, same old. We are drawn to what is interesting, be it food, culture, and most importantly, clothing. It breathes life into us and makes our spirits soar. I've always been a bit anti-establishment and have always had a little bit of a problem with authority. I remember back in the 60s when we said that our long hair was our black skin, and people shuddered at that thought, but it was true. We were perceived as not normal. Why don't you get a haircut? Your hair's too long. You don't look clean. Well, that was sort of the idea. Because what was clean was vanilla. It wasn't interesting. It probably had a lot to do with the fact that I've always identified with counterculture, or as we used to say back in the day, I always walked to the beat of a different drummer. And to this day, I still do. May Charlie Watt rest in peace. We will always be seen no matter what we are wearing, as long as it's not vanilla. So let's talk a little bit about the disruptors, as I like to call them. We were always trying to find the next thing and to make people enjoy the concept of shopping. And listening to this, as it is the same thing, it is not something that you need, but rather something that you want. There's a very big difference. Nobody needs anything that we are selling. To this day, that's what makes shopping, be it in person or online, exciting. It makes people want to purchase that skirt or that dress or that jacket or that pair of jeans or that t-shirt. Well, the t-shirt is a whole other story, and that will be a topic for a different time. But who we were, the people behind the clothing lines that changed the world, and who they are now, is in and of itself a great story. To be clear, it was just as important for our generation to have great creators and even better disruptors, as I like to call them, to keep us looking cool. Now, the list of disruptors is long, and I'm sure I've left out some, but I will give you the ones that to me were the most, and still are to this day, the most important. There was Sean Stussy, who had a clothing line called Stussy, which still exists today, although Sean sold it, and this is not a joke, to a man named Frank Sinatra. Not that Frank Sinatra, a much different Frank Sinatra. There was Willie Smith from Williewear, Lance Karish and Gene Pressman from the clothing line Basco, which was from Barney's. Maurice Sassoon, one of my dear, dear friends, not the Sassoon jeans that you're thinking of, but Maurice Sassoon. Kathy Hardwick, Sarah Sturgeon, Michael Glasser, who had a great clothing line called Bronx, Tommy Hilfiger, who to this day is still pretty important in the world of fashion, Marité and Francois Gerbeau, Barry Perlman and Jean Montesanto, the founders of Lucky Jeans, Nigel Caborn, Tanya Sarn from the clothing company Ghost, Catherine Hamnett, Paul Smith, Susan Hahn, Maurice Malone, Cliff Abbey, Ray Kawakubo, who is the designer of Comme des Garçons, Junya Watanabe, Jill Sander, Steve and Andy Rosenstein from Fatigues, and Matilda Haldor's daughter from Matilda. So those people, from the time that I started up until today, have influenced me and you, and some of the best things that you own were made by them. Now, to put that all into perspective, you had to go to a store to buy these things back when I started. Today, you can still come into a store, but you can also buy them online. The most important thing about shopping, and this is not cliche at all, is customer service. It always has been and always will be the number one most important part of the business that will never change. Today, the retail store is still a very important experience for most people. You can't take away the interaction between you and the person that is helping you, assisting you, showing you what they think you will look good in, which is a lot different from walking into a store and not even finding anybody to take care of you, which unfortunately in most of the big box stores and designer stores throughout the world, people don't care. Today, the retail store, if it is done properly, is one of the best experiences one can have when they are spending money. Being kind and compassionate to that person that is spending their hard-earned money and trying to look their best is an art form. And it may be disappearing, but there are still fantastic stores in America where people earn the customer's respect and the customer keeps coming back because they know that they will get something, anything that will make them feel good, but more importantly, look good, and they will be seen. In my years, I had the pleasure of meeting many, many, many people that on a whim opened up a store because there was a lack of coolness where they were living. That's the reason I opened my first store in 1975 in Birmingham, Michigan, where I still am today with the Matilda by Mark Keller store. There's always a spot in the marketplace that isn't taken. There's something missing, be it a clothing line, a great person to help you. That is the reason that retail stores exist. And I have known some of the best. When I started out, there was a group of us, Kenny Fabricant from Rosie Jeeks in Hanover, New Hampshire, Andy Lerman from Mushka in Philadelphia, Uri and Baby Burstein from Baby & Company in Seattle, Washington. We were all like-minded, and we always kept running into each other at the same booths. And at the time, there weren't many of us. We came to meet more people down through the years. So never for a moment think that the experience of shopping is something to be trifled with, as the merchants have always been the backbone of America. In this day and age, it is even more important for the shopping experience to be special, and for the store owners that are still out there living the dream of a retailer should not be disregarded. On the contrary, they should be celebrated for their vision and the love of the industry. So I'm reminded that I keep talking about yesterday and today as far as retail goes. And I've always been asked the question, what does the future hold? Well, since I don't have that magic intuition or a crystal ball, that's what I was looking for. I have neither, but what I do know is people, hopefully, will not turn into robots, will not be buying the same exact thing, will not look like Stepford wives, and will always be able to shop in a retail store. That, to me, is the most precious experience one can have buying clothes. Now, I do understand that it's easy to shop online and it's convenient, and we have an online store. So here's the plug: www.matildur, mattthildur.com. So yes, you can go online. And yes, you can buy things and return them. And yes, there's somebody on the other end that will answer your question, not a robot, not AI, real people. And if we ever lose that, I think we're in trouble. I don't want to be a bearer of bad news, because I don't think that retail will ever die. On the contrary, I think it's going to be very important for people to still be able to have the experience of being in a store, being with people, being able to touch the merchandise, to try the merchandise on. Yes, you can do that online. Yes, it's not the same. It's you and the mirror, instead of you and the person that's looking at you going, why don't you try another size on? Maybe this skirt would be better with that top. Maybe it doesn't look good at all. But you never want to tell somebody that. It's always better to suggest something different. And you don't ever want somebody to walk out the door looking silly. And I have to say, I love the fact that people are buying clothing online, but I also love the fact that people still want to shop in person. So being a retailer since 1964, when I was a stock boy. So I've gone from stock boy to director of Matildur USA. And when we finally opened our Matildur by Mark Keller flagship store in downtown Birmingham, where I started my clothing adventure in 1975 on my own, to this day, I still enjoy listening to people say, I still have that Kick-It sweater I bought from you. I still have the Girbaud jeans you sold me. I've given them to my grandchild, who now thinks they're cool. But probably the most important thing, or at least the most satisfying thing for me, is the look on people's face when they come out of a dressing room and actually know that they love the way they look. That is the reason I'm here. That's the reason that I am doing what I am still doing. And for all the years that I had stores, I always had the best people working in the stores. Because if not for the people in the stores that loved clothing and loved to make people look better, it wouldn't be fun. I'd just be the bean counter, and I'm not a bean counter. So the importance of the human interaction and the importance of a human being buying something, spending their hard-earned money for the most part on something that makes them look and feel good, you can't quantify that. It's special. The experience, the joy, the happiness That is why I'm in business. I make people smile. I make people happy. It might be something really insignificant like a t-shirt that fits perfectly. The arms are perfect. The neck is perfect. The fit is perfect. So perfection is something that maybe isn't a lost art. And it is still the reason that I enjoy what I do, and I enjoy the people that I work with and the customer. Because even though I might be the king of cool, the customer is the queen of cool. And you can't separate the two. It always comes back to what is cool. And to be able to define that with my eyes is sort of a superpower in a sense, because being able to pick out clothing that you think other people are going to want is a skill. And based on the many years and the many mistakes that I made, you come to realize that you're not always going to be right. And that Steven Sprouse neon yellow skinny skirt that was all the rage on the streets of New York did not necessarily translate in Birmingham. On the other hand, being in Paris and hearing about the line called Compliments and how cool it was, and how Mérité and François Gerbeau started stonewashing blue jeans, I was taken aback. And I thought to myself, well, this is an advance, a major advance. So I bought them. Those were the things that you take a chance and you're right. The same with this unbelievable sweater line that I sold back in the 80s called Suzanne. It was a woman from Chicago named Susan Hahn who made these beautifully graphic sweaters. And women would line up, basically, when the stuff came in to buy them. They were that impressed with the clothing. And the other great line that I can remember buying before anyone else in the state of Michigan was Ghost, which was designed by a woman named Tanya Sarn. And it was crinkled rayon. And again, dresses, blouses, skirts. It was fabulous, and people couldn't get enough. And that's the great part about being a little left of center. Well, probably a lot left of center. But you're able to take those chances. And then eventually, although not always, eventually those particular things become mainstream. And the one that I can think of, the two that I can think of the most would be Tommy Hilfiger and Massimo. Massimo ended up in Target, but when I bought it, it was just as cool as Stussy at the time. So something that starts out chocolate can somehow end up vanilla. So this first episode was brought to you by the Matilda by Mark Keller flagship store in downtown Birmingham at 227 South Old Woodward. Ask for Mark. Ask for Izzy. Ask for Lucy or ask for Camille. And if you liked this, I now have to ask you to like us, subscribe to us, and hopefully in the future you will tell your friends, your relatives, your children, maybe your grandchildren. But subscribe. It doesn't cost anything. All you got to do is click a little button that says subscribe. So I hope you've enjoyed this. We'll see you next time.